So thanks for coming to this. I hope you've all watched the lecture in advance. We're doing a flipped classroom here. So I'm Eric Klopfer. I'm a professor here at MIT. I run the teacher education program, which is a program at MIT that trains MIT undergrads to be math and science teachers. My research primarily is in using video games and simulations for math and science learning. But what I'm going to talk about today are a series of 4 edX MOOCs that we've been working on. And the aspects I'm going to try to emphasize are around the project-based nature of these, as well as the community that we're trying to build in these. Since this is the first session other than the keynote, I'll give you a little bit of context for how this session will run. I'm going to try to be really brief about my talk, maybe about hopefully 15 minutes or less. Talk about the work that we've done, but the idea here is to sort of have a discussion around these issues. So discussions hopefully around issues around using projects as the basis of courses, how you build community in courses, and a lot of the social interactions that we're trying to build into our courses. So I'm hoping that we all have a dialogue around those things. I don't think I have any answers to any of those questions. What I have are experiments that we're trying to hopefully help advance our knowledge in this space. So real quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about computer-supported collaborative learning and what we have to learn from that in MOOCs. I'm going to talk about how we've designed our own courses. Really try to spend most of my time in the next few minutes talking about how we're trying to build community in the MOOCs, specifically through peer feedback sessions and through our forums. A little bit about the projects that we're doing in the courses, and that's pretty much it, where I will launch out into hopefully building a dialogue around this. So originally when I started out with this project, as I said, my background is in educational technology. So I'm an educator, and so my original goal was, as you can see here, trying to insert a little bit of education, both literally and figuratively, into edX. And now what's happened is education actually is there, although I do not have the responsibility for that. I was not the first person. It was actually Dick Elmore at Harvard who had the first course that was in there on education, but our 2 courses are now up there, 2 of our 4. 11.126 and 11.132. But our idea is, in addition to really getting courses about education into edX, to do exactly what this conference is doing here today and tomorrow, really thinking about how we get really education and learning and the lessons of education and learning into edX courses, and courses not even specifically to edX, but more generally in MOOCs. So we have 4 courses. I pointed out 2 of them. Whoops, back. Take too long. We have 4 courses that are launching. 2 of them are in the fall that I mentioned just now. Those are on the design and development of educational technology and the design and development of games. We have 2 more launching in the spring, one on design and development of educational games and one on implementation and evaluation of educational technology. These are what's known as an X series. They kind of all come together, so you can take all 4 courses and get some sort of special certificate for doing that. But our goal is really to help people think about the connections between these. The first 2 courses definitely sort of lead into that educational development of educational games course. But along the things that we've tried to do is sort of learn from not just what's happening in other MOOC courses, but to think about what we know about online learning from other kinds of experiences. And specifically, I try to draw on what's been known as computer-supported collaborative learning and has a long and rich history going back 20 years or so. This is CECL and the later Knowledge Forum, an online tool for really supporting face-to-face interactions in classes for kids to build knowledge about difficult topics together. There's a whole structure for how this is built. The technology itself, this is an older Mac version, but it doesn't look a heck of a lot different than that right now. The technology itself wasn't super, but the ideas, the rich theory that was supporting this about the way that we get people to work with each other online to really build knowledge themselves in a constructivist way is really important. The basic premise of this is that computer-supported collaborative learning locates learning in meaning negotiation carried out in the social world. So this is not something that happens in an individual's head, but something that happens in a social context where we build understanding about complicated ideas. So I've sort of defined a series of factors that I've talked about. The locus of the activity, the locus of the kind of environment, the activity that goes on, the structure, and the goals. This is for computer-supported collaborative learning. I'm not going to kind of go through the other ones in detail other than the synthesis that I've made. But the locus of activity here is a centralized space, so they interact through a centralized space. for collaborative learning, but it supports face-to-face learning. So there's some face-to-face project that people are doing that this environment supports. The activity is online activities building knowledge. Most of it is discussion through forums, but it's very structured forums. So you work in groups, small communities. Those forums have sort of a structure, the way that people pose questions, respond to questions, and ultimately build understanding. The structure of these are typically small classes that teachers have structured where people within an individual class interact with each other. Occasionally, sometimes people interact across classes. And the goals of these are to build knowledge as a community. So it's not just building knowledge within an individual's head, but building knowledge as a community, often around a particular project. One important thing that the CSEL community has made known, this is a publication from a few years ago on computer-supported collaborative learning, and they say it is simply not true that the posting of content such as slides, text, or videos makes for compelling instruction. Such content may provide important resources for students just as textbooks always have, but they can only be effective within a larger motivational and interactive context. And that's really important to the notion of what this kind of forum is. The idea is that the forum is not the place where learning happens, but the learning happens as part of that experience. So this is what we're building. We call it EdTech X. That's what our X series is called. And we've tried to combine some of those lessons from computer-supported collaborative learning, as well as from X MOOCs, the MOOCs that we mostly have in edX and Coursera and others, as well as the connectivist MOOCs that really sort of started this revolution as well. And the things we try to do in ours are, our locus is around a centralized site. We're launching on edX, but learning from a community, but you learn from the community, not just from a one-way interaction. The activities are community formation and networking around focused content. So the idea is that people will actually have the community itself as not just a vehicle to learning, but the community itself as a goal. The structure is weekly syllabi, typical edX formats. We have assignments, and each of the courses has a project that it leads towards. And our goal is to sort of say the certification that you get for completing this course, obviously you can print off a certificate yourself, but the real certification is that you actually have a project that you can show somebody at the end of the course. And our goal is then to participate and then create that project. The basic components, and I won't talk about all these today, are our video. We have situated video, so there's very little lecturing in these courses. Most of the video is interviews with other experts in the field. We've interviewed across all the courses something like 60 or 70 experts, some of whom are in the room with us today. So it's documentary style video. We do interviews. We do sort of case studies. Each of the courses has a project. Social learning through community is a very important aspect. That's what I'll mostly talk about today. And we try to make the work personally meaningful for them. The other thing I should mention is this is what's known as the DIY model here at MIT, the do-it-yourself model. So we're doing all the work within my lab itself. We don't have, MITx is not dedicating personnel to this. They dedicated resources, and we're doing all the work within our lab itself. And it's a model for how you can try to do some more of these kinds of courses without having a dedicated staff at one centralized place. So real quickly on the video component, our goals for doing the video in this way was not simply that lecturing is boring, but really thinking about what does the video represent. And our goal was to represent that learning is situated. So each of these videos is situated within a particular environment, within a particular context. And we know that learning that goes on as experts is done sort of within that context. That knowledge is community driven. That's not that I am the single source of knowledge within this space, but that I know lots of people who are experts and I can provide access to those. And it's also to see the way those experts apply the knowledge themselves. I won't show video, but I'll show you what some of the video looks like, hopefully. These are some of the these are some of the just stills of some of the stuff that we show here. So there's interviews, as you can see, sort of casual interviews on tacky couches. We have demonstrations of people who are developing new products. We have studio tours. That's what's in this shot here. This is a tour of a game development studio talking about the way that teams work together, who are the different roles, how do they collaborate, and then other experts that we sort of do in more traditional interview style. The projects that we have for each of these courses, they're 6 weeks long. They vary in terms of what the projects are. For the 2 courses on games, educational games and design development of regular games, the final project is some sort of game that you're developing, an educational game or just an entertainment game. For the design development of educational technology, the final project is a Kickstarter-style pitch for new educational technology, but you have to back that up with your theory about the research that's going to support this product, et cetera. And the implementation and evaluation of educational technology is about an implementation plan for some new educational technology. The way that we develop those projects is there's sort of parallel tracks of assignments. There's some assignments that come early on that are much more structured in the way that they're graded or evaluated anyway. There's peer assessment that goes on, so you have some sort of assignment that you have. You post that assignment. You have peers that evaluate that assignment and get it back to you. That's for the first few weeks in the course. We pretty early start, though, a more general and open community feedback structured sessions where you're working towards your final project pretty quickly. And in those cases, there's less structured feedback. Instead, you sort of post your ideas, your projects, your videos, ultimately your final projects within a forum, and then you get feedback through the community. And I'll talk about how we structure those different things. So there's peer assessment, there's community feedback, and those sort of merge towards the final projects at the end. Some of you may have used peer grading in your own courses or thinking about using peer grading. I'm interested to talk about that. There's been some controversy, I'll say. Some people say that peer grading simply can't work for a number of reasons. But there's been sort of nice research that sort of has emphasized ways that we can sort of develop rubrics and principles for helping us structure peer grading so that it can work effectively. One of the important things that we're doing is, this is the typical grading structure within an edX course. This is our grade, so if you do anything, you pass, and if you don't, you fail. And so it's pretty important for us. That's one of the ways of making peer grading effective is to have low stakes. And our goal is really not to have peer grading, but peer assessment. So we want to focus on the feedback and the learning that people are providing for each other, not the grades. We hopefully can structure and train people so that they can provide that useful feedback. Part of this is not just software engineering, and I think this goes for a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about in terms of community. It's not just about software engineering, but it's about social engineering. How do we create communities that allow for this kind of exchange? And feedback in groups is one of the things that we're trying to emphasize. So this is the way that forums typically look in edX, or Coursera's don't look very much different than this, nor do many of the other forums that exist now. So you have one set of forums that exists there on the side. You have, usually in the first few weeks, you have lots of people posting in lots of different threads, very hard to sort through. And then sort of participation falls off pretty quickly in those forums. But in a lot of cases, that's not essential to the course. Those forums are there really to support and for questions. In our case, where we really want to have the forums as the basis for a lot of the learning that goes on, we want to make sure that we can actually have the forums that support that. So we've imported our own set of forums that are going to be attached to the course. I won't go into many of the technical details of how we're doing this, but if people have questions on that, I'm happy to entertain those questions and to have that as a topic of discussion. But it's external forums that you can log into through the same login that you do through your edX course. So we have things like there's voting that you can sort things in different ways. There's tags that you can have here. There's lots of different ways that you can sort and find things within these forums that provide additional levels of structure that you don't normally find in these forums. Importantly, we have along with this an identity that goes with this. So for the most part, your identity in MOOCs is maybe you can see somebody who participates in a forum, but you can't really track them. You don't really develop any identity there, certainly for helping other people out. So our goal here is to be able to provide sort of a little bit of social networking component where you can make friends with in this space. You can track the number of posts that you have. You can look at other people's posting behaviors within this space. So our goal really is to create sort of a community, and I think identity is a really important part of creating that community. We've separated out discussion forums from question forums. So the discussion forums are for posting things about the course content. The question forums are if you have a specific question that you need answered. Sometimes it's a technical question. I don't know how something is working. I can't submit my assignment. Does anybody have suggestions for how I can upload a video? So for this, we have more of the kind of Stack Overflow style voting systems for questions where you have you can sort things by views, you can vote on things, you can vote on the best answers for things, people can accept answers for questions that they have. It's a much more structured system for allowing question and answers. So importantly, for computer-supported collaborative learning to work, it's about collaboration, not just sort of group participation. So I won't read this out loud, but it's about not about sort of reacting just simply in isolation to someone else's post that goes online, but thinking about interactions that happen as community and as groups. And we need to think about ways that we can foster those discussions to happen, not just as one big community, but as smaller communities. Some courses have gone to posting, dividing the class up into alphabetical sections, so A through F go in this forum, and G through L go in another forum, and that's a nice way of sort of making it a slightly smaller community. What we've done is introduce groups into our forums so that you can have groups that are there that allow for, that can be public groups, so people can open up a group and anybody can join. You can create private groups where you have a small number of people maybe from your profession, from your geographic area, from your school that are together. And you can participate in multiple groups. You're not isolated to one group necessarily. You can join multiple groups. And our goal here is to have people mostly be posting their projects and to be getting feedback in these groups. So we'll also have a forum dedicated to people getting into these groups, because that is an issue in and of itself. And there's been past failures in that regard that we don't want to echo. But I think that allowing people to sort of participate in these smaller communities is an important way to allow people to develop that identity and develop relationships with other people. So our first course is available online now. It's launching in October. This is the one on design development of educational technology. 2 weeks later, we'll have one on games that launches as well, and that's open as well. The last thing I'll mention is, and this relates to a little bit to what Susan talked about this morning, we often have difficult times. This workshop is a great way for us to kind of share ideas about what we're doing, what works well, what we're working on. We've actually just launched, and we had some flyers out front about this, a new website called Education Express. It's a publishing platform that we're trying to be able to create here that allows people to share experiences that they're having in lots of different forms of online and digital learning, and be able to do this in a much more rapid rate than we can through typical online or print journals, where feedback cycles often take years. We're hoping that we can keep these feedback cycles on the order of weeks or months and be able to create a much better forum for people sharing these ideas. So with that, I will say thanks, and the rest of the time we have for discussion. So I was asked to try to have the microphones used in some productive way, so maybe I'm going to juggle them. Actually, it's funny you say that, because in one of the videos from my courses, I do some juggling. So what we'll do is, it may actually be useful to have, I don't want this dialogue to necessarily have to go through me. This is a community that we're hopefully creating here. But I'll pass around these microphones, and hopefully we can pass around the other microphones. If you want a response from me, I'm happy to respond. But other people in the audience are welcome to respond as well.
Thank you. Thanks for a really interesting little look at your work. I really appreciated that. I had a question for, just absolutely anybody. I think that there's kind of a chicken and egg problem, with some of these forum spaces, right? And it's really, it's a really complicated problem to try to get people interacting, to try to build a community. Like, what you want it to look like, but obviously people come in and they take a look at the forums and they're like, okay, what is this forum community? Is it a post a question, get an answer? And I'm sure if your data looks anything like our data, right, it's like 99.9% of students only look at the forums. They don't actually post, right? So I'm just interested in, how anybody here approaches this kind of problem. I'm also interested in this idea of having an identity online, which, I know a lot of people, they want to know what other people are, who other people are, but they don't really want to. Disclosure is a big problem online, right? And there's some benefit to, if you're going to be grading your peers, to being able to do that in an anonymous way. On the other hand, there's also a really interesting benefit to having, a one-on-one, relationship that continues between you and the person that you're grading or you're working on. So, other strategies that other people have used to approach that kind of issue with forums, I'd love to hear.
These are all great questions, and I'll throw it out there to everybody to answer. I'll respond actually on behalf of another colleague, because some of this data that has come out on the participation rates in the forums, and I have one colleague, Dan McFarland, who's at Stanford, and I noticed that in the graphs that his graph is the outlier all the way on the high participation rate of something like 80 or 90% of the people participating in the forums multiple times. And I asked him, how did you do that? And he just wrote back, he said, I required it. So it's partially, but that gets back to the sort of social engineering aspects of this. It's about what do you express as a course? What are the values that we have as a course? Is the forum, is the community just sort of an extra add-on that you want to say that it's okay if you participate? Or is the community sort of a core value to the system? We and now that we're modeling with things that other people have done as well, again, our passing rate is you don't need to do very much to sort of pass the course. But we do have checklists each week, which is an assignment where you say, did I participate in the forums? Did I give 3 people feedback? And it's on the honor system for people, obviously, to do that themselves, and others have done similar things. But again, it's a way of sort of communicating to the community, what are the things that we're valuing that you do within this course? Other thoughts? Yeah, so please.
Yeah, so I got the mic. So, so first, I want to just say thanks for this session, because this is something that was missing from the keynote, which is the inclusion of social learning as a critical component of what MOOCs are all about, and also for drawing on the history of online learning research that has existed for a long time. So fantastic. And I just wondered if you could say a few more things about the collaboration part, not just discussion and posting into forums, but the collaboration often creates that kind of glue that lets peers share their expertise and pool that expertise towards a kind of product or submission assignment that they have jointly developed, and often kind of creates a bond that will go well beyond that initial assignment. I just wondered if you could say a few words about how you've structured it and whether you're noticing a bond that goes beyond the initial assignment. Yeah, so at this point it's purely aspirational. The courses don't launch until October. But the audience that we've tried to recruit are sort of diverse audiences. So for the Design Development of Educational Technology course, our goal was to sort of get people who are coming from education, who are more interested in technology, some people who are more engineers, who are interested in sort of moving into educational technology, as well as entrepreneurs who sort of see educational technology as the next big wave. And I think sort of having this sort of more diverse audience can allow people to sort of create more interesting kinds of projects. You know, if I'm coming from an education side, I may not have the technical skills to really think about how I could do this, or think about the business plan. So hopefully we're going to try to get people to form groups where you have sort of more diverse sets of skills, where the project that you develop then can reflect those multiple different aspects to it. In the first few weeks when you're doing those peer-reviewed assignments, we expect those to be submitted individually. So those you do have individual sort of accountability for, but as you move towards the final project, multiple people can submit those same ones, so they're just being reviewed in the forums. So when you have these teams that are working together, they can submit one thing and all claim credit for that equally.
So I wanted to comment on Catherine's question and also the collaboration. In one of our sets of classes, we did the sort of thing that the gentleman was talking about earlier about getting people incentives to sit in the front. We said, if you comment in this forum as the last person, you have to comment on everything that was said before you. This one, you don't have to comment on anybody else's stuff. It worked a little bit. But for collaboration, I think you really need something other than a text-based discussion forum. You need a Google Doc, you need a Sketchpad, you need an Etch-a-Sketch. You need something like that where people can literally go in and write on the document and do block diagrams and things like that. Yeah.
I think you're right. There are the group functionalities that we have built in here do have some simple docs that you can sort of share with other people, but not as the highly interactive ways that you have Google Docs. And it's a question I think that we have as a community as to how much we want to sort of build that into our courses, those kinds of tools, versus what we sort of we can support maybe the teams being created, and we expect them to then use those tools that already are freely existing outside the courses themselves. And I think it's an open question. There's reasons why we might want to build them in, certainly for equity of access across the world, where maybe people have certain sites that are blocked, where for research purposes, where we can capture that data if it's actually happening within our courses. But on the other hand, it may not make sense to build all those things if they exist already out there.
So
I just want to say one thing. When you do have a question, just say who you are and where you're from.
So Margot Seltzer from Harvard. So I want to follow up on sort of this whole point about small group formation and collaboration. So we ran a combo MOOC SPOC where in order to apply for the SPOC, you had to form a group. We used a combination of technologies that I'll talk about in a minute, and I'd give it about a B. We're not happy with the technologies, we actually need to improve. So we were using Piazza for our online discussion forum, and then we sort of had a tailored version of something called Project Lever, however they pronounce it, which is a platform that was initially designed to help graduate students find advisors and vice versa. And we had them tailor it so that you could try to put together a multidisciplinary team that involved, a healthcare professional, an entrepreneur, a finance guy, et cetera. So a lot of the same kinds of things you're talking about. And with respect to that first question about anonymity versus identity, on the Piazza forum, people's identities could sort of be whatever they wanted. But in Project Lever, since the whole goal was to facilitate this diverse group construction, we encouraged people to upload their CV as part of the process. And so it gave the students sort of two different ways to interact, and you were able to keep your identity private until you find a common interest, and it's kind of like a dating service, right? You look interesting to me, you can look at my profile without knowing too much about me. Are you interested? And should we meet in real life? And it really does have a little bit of a dating feel to it. But that was sort of how we balanced it out. As I said, we're not happy. We're going to go back and revisit that. But going back to your question about collaboration, these small teams that formed to apply to the SPOC, these guys produced business plans, many of whom are continuing now that the course is over and are talking to us and are actually going forth and actually starting businesses. So that's kind of cool and kind of exciting and something that could not have happened because these teams have people from different continents. And it's kind of cool.
That's great. I think I echo the need for the eHarmony for work groups online.
So one of my former students actually started one of those companies, and I'm working on it.
Excellent. Keep us posted.
Well, in some ways, following up on that actually is, so what is sort of the group's opinion about, Jackie from Smithsonian, what is the group's opinion on the role of sort of a community manager, if you will, in terms of facilitating dating, or even just saying so-and-so suggested this really great idea that you might be interested in, and clearly more advanced tools make that much easier to do in terms of connecting threads of conversation and having almost a little more of a Twitter-esque, hopefully, type of experience. But I'm just curious to know what people's experience in terms of the resources that they've dedicated to that and what the upside's been.
I can actually start. So I'm Ann from NovoEd, and we have group formation on the site. And we do a couple of things to facilitate that. One is with design and of the course and the first assignment. And so it's not so much the student profile, who they are as a person, it's their identity as a learner in the course. And so when people match up that way, you don't need so much the algorithm, they're more comfortable doing it themselves. But as for community manager, one thing that we're seeing that's working really well, especially in our entrepreneurship classes, is having a mentor. So we're having mentors sign up on the course as a mentor, and then students pick out mentors based on criteria. That's the dating part, or that's where that analogy is. And then the mentors really guide them and coach them through. So this is a way you can really scale, and they work on these same projects that then have real-world applications. We've seen it in mobile health, health apps. We've seen entrepreneurship apps. We've seen it in teachers. We've got improvement science projects. We've got a ton of different stuff.
Hi, Mark Lester from FutureLearn, which is the UK-based MOOC platform. Very interesting what you're doing, and also appreciate all the comments coming in. I listened to this, and it all resonates, because actually the way we've designed the platform, and I think where you'll have some more success with what you're trying to do, is we have a community, so people do fill in a profile. There is that whole Twitter style of communication where you can follow people and communicate directly with them. But what really makes we don't really call them forums, because in each step, every video, every article, every piece has its own discussion area. That in itself enables that water-cooler conversation that people want to have when you consume content and you want to create meaning out of that content right there and then. That instant part where it's not divorced. You don't have a discussion that's then in another area, because that psychological break is very important. By having it right there, people engage. So our courses routinely have 50% of our learners commenting multiple times on the courses. And that's not because our universities are special at doing it, it's because that's what the platform enables them to do. And that's where the mentorship and other things can come in, because actually what we have is other students can follow, by looking at comments, they can follow comments which are people who have made comments that they found particularly useful. It's the whole idea of the zone of proximal development. You will learn most from people slightly more advanced than you, not overly advanced than you, or not under you, but you pick those and then filter those comments. So you can just see those people and have a better dialogue. And it's all about facilitating that better conversation, which is what it should be all about.
There's I think a lot of great design principles in there. And I know that in terms of discussion and context, I haven't seen this in any MOOCs, although it may exist, but it certainly exists on other places on the internet, are, when you have an article and you can sort of do commenting anywhere you want in the article, and those comments sort of exist within that space. And there's, I know, tools already in development and testing for doing similar things in video, where you can sort of comment at particular places in the video.
And I'll just jump in on so Paul Stacey with Creative Commons, about the community formation piece. I think it's a really great question. It's not enough, clearly, to simply plunk in a technology and expect a community to happen. You actually have to structure it to make it happen. And a lot of success around community building is also involved putting in place, let's call it the mayor of the community, whose role is to bolster that kind of groundswell of participation, because often what you find is that if someone will actually help structure things to make activities and allow people to come forward, then people will come forward. So, somewhat like programming a radio station, you actually have to figure out what you want to happen over the course of time. And so I think assigning someone, even if it's a tutor, the role of a mayor, or finding a mayor from within the community itself, can be a really fantastic way to make it happen.
I'll just also echo the last part of what you said there in terms of, again, all of our stuff is aspirational at this point, but we've talked to other folks who have used both sort of dedicated staff from within their own labs or institutions, as well as these community TAs, who are people who sort of rise up either really quickly, or make contact in advance of a course, and people have had success with that model as well. Yep, there and then here.
Hi, Sasha Thackerberry, Cuyahoga Community College. I think it's interesting, all the emphasis on the activity in the social forums. I also think it's interesting because we had a project where we looked at active engagement using social media and inactive engagement, and we actually found greater gains from people who were lurkers as opposed to people who were actively commenting and posting on the comments of other folks. Much like in this room, there are those of us who are speaking, and there are a lot of people, hopefully, who are not just answering emails, who are participating, but in a maybe commentary manner. So I wondered if there was any research that you knew of, or anyone, in fact, knew of, on the correlation between kind of that ghosting, that lurking in these social spaces, and actual achievement of the outcomes. And I understand that in your case, the active engagement is part of the goal.
Does anybody else comment over there on this? Here, you can use my microphone.
Right. We didn't research the lurkers, but we noticed them. What we did research was that the students that most actively engaged in the forums had a higher retention and reached the certificate. I'm Tanya de Bie from Leiden University. We're working with Coursera. And we've seen that over 4 MOOCs now. So that's one of the reasons why we are investing into community management, because I'm actually the community manager. So we're doing that.
I will add, so you mentioned zone of proximal development earlier, and it's something that people have done research on in forums in the past. I know colleagues who have done this in forums that surround the use of games. And for people who are new to the community, they actually don't feel ready to necessarily participate right away. So if you're in a community where you feel like they're already experts, if you're a novice, you don't feel ready that you can, asking your question is going to look really dumb. So you do often lurk first, but that lurking in that way is being sort of in that zone of proximal development, because you're sort of in this and some sort of legitimate peripheral participation, you're actively reading the forums. Maybe you're sort of finding which are the most important forums, figure out who are the people who are good in those, figure out the kinds of questions, the way people pose questions in that space. So there are ways of being readers in that space and participating in legitimate ways before you actually become a poster. So I think that it's a behavior I think that's hard to capture because the rest of it, you can see that what people read and maybe how often they read, but you can't really know what sort of is going on in their head as they read those things. You have the mic, so you get next.
Oh, is this okay? Hi, I'm Chinmay from Stanford University, and I think speaking a little bit to what you said, I think a good place to look at the sort of community building is in offline communities. If you look at say things like Jane Jacobs, and she talks about familiar strangers. There's a lot of familiar strangers on MOOCs, right? You see these people on forums and you know them kind of, but not really, right? And I think one design lever that we have here is that familiar strangers can become more collaborators or, people who are more actively engaged with you. So I have this one research project, it's called Talk About, and the way we do this is we just have small group video discussions, and you're paired up randomly with someone from anywhere in the world, right? So that is more like chat roulette than it is dating in some sense. But what we've seen is that at the end of these discussions, a lot of times people actually go out of their way and then share their personal information like LinkedIn profiles and so forth. So I think there is a ramp up from going from a familiar stranger to a collaborator, and we should be, probably be leveraging that a lot more.
Did we lose one of our mics? Is there a mic out there somewhere still?
Yeah, I think
okay.
they're doing a follow-on though, so I wouldn't let them.
Okay.
I have a follow and a new. Follow-up is that
Who are you?
Oh, sorry, I'm Margaret Shadell from Stony Brook University, and I did a Coursera MOOC, and I used it to flip my classroom, and the second time that I did it, I had noticed that my in-person students weren't using the forums very much. So the second time I did it, I required them to participate in the forums, and then they had to journal about how they helped someone. And I actually noticed that the forums came alive because I had 80 students in person having to sort of seed that experience. And my other question is, for the courses that you are teaching that sequence, I'm looking on edX, it's 6 weeks long, but the second one starts 2 weeks after the first, so they're overlapping, and I'm just wondering why, and that's totally unrelated.
It's a question of how we pull off 4 in 1 year. And so we decided that we would have to overlap them in order to be able to do that. It's a design constraint, unfortunately, not an affordance as far as I'm concerned.
Hi, I'm Louisa. I work with Eric on these MOOCs. If some people are taking both of the courses, there's definitely a lot of ways that each course will inform their work in the other course. So like if they're designing games and they want to do a games project as part of the first course, they'll have the tools and more ability to do that. So there is some benefit for people that are taking both, which hopefully will be a lot of people since it's in a series. So that's one aspect.
So I'm Joseph Williams. I'm at Stanford now, but I'm moving to Harvard X in September. And so one thing I was curious to hear your thoughts and everyone else's is thinking about what the role of modularity or modularizing these efforts might be. Because some tensions that seem to have been brought up are one is that iterative revision that you're doing in your course and training people to do, but then also how you bring communities around something. And so if we were to think of how do you take a whole MOOC, and instead of thinking at the course level, can we think almost more like MOOClets, like modules, or decomposing it? That might make it easier to revise them. And it also means that you could take one course instead of one community. You could have many different communities around pieces. Or you could bring together, like Susan Singer mentioned this morning, researchers and practitioners. So I'm curious to hear people's thoughts, because at Stanford, we've sort of had a discussion group about like a MOOClets group where we think about different aspects of how MOOClets can let us iteratively revise, collaborate, embed experiments. So I'd be really curious to other people's thoughts. I know a lot of people have been thinking about modules as well.
I think from my perspective, you have a comment on that? From my perspective, with respect to community, it would be important in those cases to think about ways that you have both identities and groups that can persist across those MOOClets, if you call them that. Because to develop community takes a while. 6 weeks even in and of itself is probably on the short side of that. Maybe for an intense experience it works, but if it's down to 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably too short. But if you have ways of sort of interconnecting those, I mean, the modularization sort of goes along with the ways that you connect these. So if you have identity, if you have groups that can persist across those, some sort of meta infrastructure that allows you to do that can facilitate some of those things happening even within that kind of context.
Excited to hear that topic. Susan Huggins, Kaplan University in Fort Lauderdale. We recently launched what's called Open College at KU, which is a new initiative to try to bring some open learning resources to our students that currently exist in a more traditional environment. And one of the things that we did do is modularize courses. Several reasons. First of all, to group them into smaller segments, because learners often are gravitated toward learning that takes less time. They learn just what they need when they need it. And we also created assessments that matched the modularized learning. So if a learner comes to us and, say they've been a manager for 15 years and they've got all this managerial knowledge, except in this one area, they can actually come to our open course and learn just that one area. So that's another reason we did the modularization, is so that learners can learn what they want to learn, not take a whole course to try to dig out what it is they need.
And so I think actually building on that, and also on a comment that Susan said about we're doing the wrong kind of flipping, it's about sort of putting problems first and then sort of materials second. If those MOOClets could really be sort of really just heavily content-based, but you could imagine a surrounding project that you want to do. So now I want to build a solar car is one, those kinds of things that people talk about. Build a solar car. Well, what are the component things I'm going to need to learn from that? What are the MOOClets that I need to take in order for me to be able to build that project? And maybe there's a separate sort of community that's about, this is a project-based thing for you to build solar cars, and we're going to have discussions here, and you can go, here's the things that can help support you. So you can sort of think about other ways and kinds of structures that can help support those smaller modules. At a face-to-face university, those things might exist locally. Microphone up there, so I'll...
We've been talking about forming communities in an online world. I wanted to comment on an experience I had on my residential course, in which for the last few years I've struggled to get participation in discussion forums. And last year I discovered that when I required it, of course they posted and that was part of the grade and so on. But I discovered they had a very active discussion forum in Facebook outside of my view. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts about, for me as a teacher, I wanted to see what's going on there. For there as the students, they didn't want me there. So I was wondering how much of the benefit you see in the learning of the students occurs through community that they may be forming, in particular in residential courses, they're also forming community in person-to-person interactions.
Does anybody have thoughts on that?
It builds into the point that, or the comment that I wanted to make. I'm Jamie LaRue, Bunker Hill Community College. I've used a lot of the research that Jane McGonigal did on game research and incorporating that in education, and I have found a lot of success in creating communities using game-style tactics, earning points and having an avatar or some kind of profile or whatever, and also having small tasks that students can complete and get kind of instant feedback on. And that's been very successful, both in online and in-person formats. We have a social engineering game and an ethical hacking course that we have where students earn points for completing social engineering tasks. And also in a help desk techniques course where students earn points for completing coming up with a help desk scenario in which they're having a problem. They're the person calling into help desk, and the other students have to respond to that problem, and vice versa. And it also has cultivated a lot of this peer-to-peer learning. Mainly, I've done this because in community colleges, we don't have TAs, we don't have assistants, we don't have a lot of help, and so I need the students to help each other. I need them to collaborate so that they can get the most out of the course possible. So. so I've tried to take the Facebook model of, you know, kind of the friendly and incorporate it into the course in some way, shape, or form through kind of game social media tactics.
I'll add a couple things on the Facebook point. It's something that we've wrestled with. How much do we want to, Facebook groups pop up around a lot of online courses. And the question is why? And so there's different things around, well, maybe they pop up because that's where people are, and so they just put things there. So no matter what I would do, they would also sort of pop up there. And that may be the case. But it may be that certain features and the styles of interaction and other things like that are not present in the more very highly structured forums that we see typically in online courses don't sort of facilitate the same kind of communication that they're more familiar with. And so we can figure out ways to sort of get more of that happening within the course. And I think there are good reasons for trying to do that. One is to make sure that people aren't left out for different sort of access reasons. The other is obviously for our own research that we can sort of improve things if we know what people are talking about. And I will also say that similar, I think, to what you've seen, I've used forums for my face-to-face courses for many years now, where students do some activity outside of class that sort of then continues on in class. And they then continue to use those forums to support each other in cases where I don't require it even outside of class. So I think over here.
So my name is Ursula Woles, and I have a little startup, and in order to finance my mortgage is probably the best way to put it. I've been an itinerant faculty member. I was at the College of New Jersey for 20 years, spent a year at Olin College, which is kind of the opposite of an online institution, and then at a couple of state colleges in New Jersey. And I've run online courses, I've designed online courses, I've used them, and I've run the gamut. It's been a fun couple of 4 or 5 years. But I wanted to follow up on the Facebook model. I've actually done that, where I've created a forum that's entirely for my students. And this was recommended to me for some people who do game design. And that is essential for them, to have a private place where I can't get in there and understand who's doing what and how they're doing it. And then I also wanted to follow up on the idea of how do you motivate them into a collaborative space. I've done this with everything from middle schoolers to graduate students. I put them on Google Drive, and I open up the draw facility, and I say, draw me a mural. And after they get past erasing each other's stuff and changing the colors and all of that, they actually give me a really nice expression, and you get to see a lot about their personalities, and they get to see the personalities of each other. It turns out, for me, it's worked better in a face-to-face class than when I've done it in a distant environment. And I asked my distant class about this, and they told me it's because they could giggle with each other next to each other. And one of them actually did this pretty little design, this was in a technology course, of how she would facilitate that kind of knowing the person who was doing the drawing and all of that. So there's something to be said for the community can happen, but getting some kinesthetic information about that person next to you seems to be really important.
Good. Up there.
I'm actually curious about, is it okay, or?
Yeah, the microphone's got to make its way over to the other side, so
okay.
You go
I was gonna switch it a little bit, unless, do you have a follow-up over there? Because I was interested in exploring like the project-based components of some of this. We've talked a lot about the social and connectivist kind of pedagogy that's in this. So is that okay, or do you have something on top of the Facebook? Because I don't want to.
Well, not so much Facebook, but sort of this notion of a community. So Rob Lew at Harvard. So coming back to that issue of what modularization might mean, but also the issue that increasingly MOOCs and other online courses have extremely long duration now, so that folks can come in at very different times. One might argue that that flies in the face of a stable community. But I wonder if this notion of stability is perhaps too constrained, too fixed, and can we think of sort of a dynamically stable community where folks come in and folks leave, but that at really any given moment, there is a functional community that is learning effectively, but that would really free us of the need to really define the duration or even define the content that they're tackling. Has anyone tried to create such a dynamically stable community that moves throughout time, but the membership changes over time?
Yeah, I mean, that does happen, right? the comment, in case you couldn't hear it, on online games that happens, right? So you have some activity, you have people that come and go from that activity. Even within that activity, there are groups that sort of evolve and change, and then certainly the community that exists outside of it, the forums that exist outside of that, those also have that sort of dynamic space. It's a question of how. Those are usually the ones that are successful are very large. So there's something about scale there, where if you two things I think that I can think of from playing those games. One is that you have scale, so you can have lots of people coming and going. You can still have a large number of people who are there for a while. And the other is just to have something that you can continue to do in that space. So and there are many things that people do in online games. Some of it is they take a new character and they bring it all the way back up again. And so it's taking a new trajectory through the same space. So how do we do that with courses? They're sort of providing new and ongoing challenges, so the game itself changes over time. So there's new and ongoing challenges within that space. And there's also mentorship that goes on. So so there's the role that you play within those games that the game tells you play, but what you do in that space as a human being does change. So I might go from a learner in that space to sort of a more mentor in that space where I'm helping other people do that. So some people helped me through that online game. Now I'm helping my kids through that online game. So how do you sort of change ways that allow people to participate in different kinds of ways within that space?
I'm curious, do we have course examples online that do that?
Are there any? So the only things I can think of, so some of the connectivist MOOCs were more persistent because they were highly individual in terms of what people were doing, and the content itself could grow because people could keep adding things to those. So the fact that the courses themselves were dynamic, I don't know what the stats are, but I think they lasted a fair bit longer than our typical MOOCs do here. I will say one really trivial thing that we are planning on doing for ours. I'm not sure whether we're actually going to do this. It's not getting nearly all the way to where you're describing, which I think is exactly what we would like to do. But for each of the forums that are project-based, we're thinking about doing synchronous and asynchronous forums. So the synchronous are for people who are doing it the week that the syllabus says that you're supposed to do it. And the asynchronous is for people who lag some number of weeks. And so we'll keep the course open for a little bit longer, allowing people who lag some number of weeks to sort of exist within that space and be able to do that. So it provides some flexibility, not nearly as much as and it doesn't really have the advantages, because I think what you get out of an idea like yours is you get a community that can sort of really be functional, really, and the course material is just one part of that function.
I just had another follow-on to that, which was just to look at. All right, thank you. I just had another example, which is maybe to look at, learning coding, right, online, on all those huge programming, kind of communities, which, is kind of both overlaps with university, MOOCs, and also is a whole world of its own. And I think they've done some incredibly successful, structures of courses online for that sort of thing.
I can just answer the question. Vivek Goel from Coursera and University of Toronto. There was a introduction to programming course that the University of Toronto left open after the session ended. And that kind of community continued to exist, and people would be answering. There was basically a small group of what I would describe as super users who stuck around and would answer questions for people who would be coming in and doing the problems in the course. So it is, I think, possible to create those kinds of communities.
I have another piece of evidence for that for Coursera course programming, where there was one docent. There was a member of the community emerged, who was clearly in the industry and wasn't an academic. And everybody basically followed his course notes in order to survive the first version of this MOOC. And it was a programming one. What was interesting is that I got a forum notice about 4 months later. Where are you? We need you in the second course. And so apparently there was a community that continued on, and the dynamics of the community shifted. I grabbed the microphone because I wanted to follow up on a point you made. We think about that older person being the mentor, but in my personal life, I have a 21-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, and they are both Pokemon fanatics. And I was floored at the dinner table 2 nights ago. I hadn't seen my kids in a couple of days. And they were talking about how the younger one has grown up in the online Pokemon community where you can trade Pokemon rather than capture them in the wild. I know this is all, I can't wrap my head around this.
It's all
Okay, it's all, I know, okay, so, but it turns out that she is far more effective at trading than her older brother who grew up in the single user community and has no trading expertise. And so she was teaching him how to trade. And so it's not that, he's the older, wiser, but rather that's what I'm seeing in the communities that are happening in my classes as well. It's all anecdotal, but this is a case in point that I think it's happening. Whether we can capture it in a formal research perspective or not is difficult, but you have to step back from it and understand that everybody can teach everybody else.
Well, so sort of a follow-up comment. The reason why I pose this in part is because as we think about how the courses evolve in response to research, in response to what instructors are doing, in response to what educational researchers are discovering, if one creates an ongoing sort of dynamically stable community, to what degree can we capture what the learners are creating and discovering to help the course evolve even further?
And actually, that was somewhat the comment I was going to make on Rob's comment, Beth from edX. We're really interested in sort of the dynamic that gets created between, in a self-study course, one that isn't proctored or run in an exact period of time with a set of outcomes that need to be, sort of delivered on a schedule, and how people will use or capitalize on that experience differently than how they would do it in a more traditional MOOC where you have it's running at a certain time and place. I won't pretend that we've figured that magic formula out yet, but it sounds very much like what Rob is referring to, which is that can you get something that gets to a sustainability model and just can keep going, but also is tied to outcomes, actually getting to achievable milestones over time, and not just a community, because we can make communities all over the place, but aren't necessarily tied to goals or milestones in time where you can say, hey, I've got that little marker, I've earned that badge, I've earned that certificate, I've earned that credential, and now that shows that I've achieved something and I can use it to go someplace else with my knowledge. So that's what it triggers for me. Your comment was about the difference between those kinds of learning experiences and how to set them up successfully.
It might also relate back to the MOOClets comment from earlier about things that sort of projects that might surround this. And so the project themselves, the MOOClets may sort of be, you kind of use them as you need to use them, come and go from them, and different projects could persist for different amounts of time depending on the sort of scale of the problem. I think the interesting thing about the sort of the coding one sort of persisting sort of, I wonder if there's something about the nature of the content itself that sort of might promote the applied nature of that problem being just used to solve practical problems might be something that might lead more to certain kinds of courses persisting than others.
No, I just wanted to say hallelujah because, when it's so content specific, right? I mean, there are certain topics, project-based topics where people learn skills individually, where that kind of setup works really well. But if you're having people come together over 4 weeks to come up with something, and you need the pressure of time, right, to create something in different skill sets and experiences, then having it open for forever doesn't work. So I think we should, we talk about these technologies and what we should do, but we should really think too how it works sensitively with content.
If I might actually, thank you, by the way, for the long-awaited segue into projects. It's like, do I hand this off? I don't want to stop the conversation, but thank you for that. Nathan Benjamin from Extension Engine. One of the things that's really interesting to me about project-based learning and really hard is, so to your point earlier about all learning needs to be personally meaningful, and as Dr. Singer said, all learning occurs in an interaction between prior knowledge and new knowledge, which means all learning is subjective. Anytime you scale, the ability to kind of subjectively instruct goes from an apprenticeship model to a lecture model, which is 500 to 1, to now we're talking 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 to 1. How do you create, and I'm curious how you created a story that you felt was going to be personally meaningful and engaging for your learners? And then second of all, at a more kind of micro level, the actual projects that they were engaging in, how did you create authentic interactions for them to perform the projects? And to Mark from Future Learn's point, I'm curious if you used X blocks to like port in pieces of like a real Kickstarter task into like via an API or something so that they were performing authentic tasks in Kickstarter, but also sort of disassembled and situated.
So for our 2 games courses, what we decided we needed to do was develop our own online game development tool that didn't require a lot of programming knowledge prior. So that was been a significant investment in our part and MITx's part in sort of developing that tool. So we wanted to give people a real tool for making real games online, but didn't require necessarily a lot of background in terms of how to make games. Certainly the programming aspect. So that was something we did have to build, and it is built in so that you can log in and you can share projects all within our edX course. So that was and that's the culminating project for those 2 courses on games. For the Kickstarter one, our idea there was to sort of try to make it authentic as you can use whatever you would like. And it's sort of up to you to decide whether it's a video, whether it's a series of images that you have and sort of a static web page. It's up to you sort of how you want to share that ultimate product that you have. We're going to give them some templates in terms of what that pitch might look like. And for different kinds of pitches, it might be different because we actually allowing them to pitch like a Kickstarter, more of like a crowdfunding thing, where you might be sort of, your audience is your funders, but we're also going to allow for more of a sort of a VC-style pitch where your pitch is to someone who might be funding you instead.
Do they define what the core product is themselves?
They define what the core product is themselves, yes. So they get to decide what the product is. It has to be some educational technology. They have certain criteria. It has to have a research basis. It has to have a theoretical basis. They have to have a way of assessing it. Yes, but what it is that they're doing is totally up to them. And I can't remember who said this before, but the idea, I think it was having a persistence beyond the course. Our hope is that it's one of our metrics is, do some of these ideas go live outside of the course? Do some of these ideas become real Kickstarter pitches? Do some of these games become something that someone develops into something later on? Yeah, back to it.
I realize it's lunchtime. Jackie Hood from Open Doors Group. I used to teach at Foothill De Anza Community College District. And in my 6 classes on project management and help and customer support, first I reminded everybody that our economy is 80% services, not objects. So services are more important to create than objects. And so each team had to support one of the technologies we used, the learning management system, Excel, PowerPoint, or the online meeting tool. And then the teams also created educational games, but they didn't have to be video games. Card games, board games, parlor games, video games. We only had one team, 18-year-olds, who did a video game. My class ranged from 18-year-olds to mid to late career people. And it was interesting that the lurkers changed positions. In the class, the younger students were in the back, not up in the front running things. Online, it reversed to some extent. A lot of the people were less comfortable with technology. And I made them, when the video game was demonstrated, get out there and play with their thumbs, and they didn't want to do it. They didn't know how to type with their thumbs. So it took some learning. So I think the lurker thing, and a lot of teachers notice this, that students who sit in the back and never say anything in class will say things online that they wouldn't do in class. And then the last one was about the long-term communities. There's a 5,000-member international community of project managers helping each other get project management certification. And many of them stay in after they get the certification and help the others. And they all learn, and especially they learn from the people who failed the test, why they failed, and so on. One last one. On Udemy, if you've watched all their on-demand courses, there's a real pressure on Udemy now to have real discussion forums. And these classes go on for years and years, tens of thousands of students taking the same class. And we believe we'll get that constant persistence of the community if they really make real forums on Udemy.
Great. So now it is lunchtime. I'm happy to stick around for a minute if anybody else wants to talk to me. But you're all free to go. Thank you for the great discussion. This was a really good session.